I don't know why we had to do this at the top. What are we doing anyway?
Sit yourself down, Dan. This is our rest day wrap-up. And the top of the Tourmalet seems like the most fitting spot, seeing as the riders are going to be coming up here this week.
Oh, I'm going to need a recovery drink before we get going.
Well, I figured you would.
Oh, dear.
So, these are what we think are the 5 biggest talking points from week 1 of the Tour de France. You're going to need a second before we get going. Number 1, the Fab Four are still in the race.
Yeah, we've been talking about the Fab Four for months before the race even started. They being Chris Froome, Nairo Quintana, Vincenzo Nibali and Alberto Contador. But the risk and the worry for us as spectators was that it might only be the Fab 3 or possibly even the Fab 2 before we even hit the mountains, due to what was always going to be a very nervous and potentially quite dangerous first week of racing.
Yeah, but despite that chaotic first week, as just described, all 4 riders are still in contention.
But are they? I mean,
Well,
Nibali and Quintana both lost what I think you could say is a significant amount of time in the stage 2 crosswinds. Now, Alberto Contador certainly didn't look at his best up the Mur de Huy on stage 3. He lost 18 seconds to Chris Froome there, whereas the other 2 only lost 11.
Yeah, and don't forget as well, Vincenzo Nibali lost a bit of time on the Mur de Bretagne just the other day as well. So of the 4, I think it's fair to say that Chris Froome is perhaps looking the strongest. He hasn't really put a foot wrong in this first week, which is particularly impressive, seeing as that he was actually quite nervous about this first week, wasn't he, when you spoke to him just before the Tour started. But interestingly though, I think those nerves have actually been on show, because there have been a few instances in this week where he's been on the front, on his own, and closing gaps and doing work. And so, you know, none of the other contenders have actually been doing that. So is it a show of strength or is it a show of nerves? What do you think?
Well, possibly a bit of both. I think he's obviously going to be very happy with where he sits in the yellow jersey, of course, going into the mountains in week 2. And he might have used a little bit of extra energy, but it was probably worth it not to lose any time.
So point number 2 now. Number 2, the Fab Four should probably now be the Fab Five. In fact, they definitely should be the Fab Five, because Tejay van Garderen of BMC is looking ominously strong, as are his team, in fact. The whole lot of them won the team time trial. So Tejay van Garderen now sits in 2nd place, having not put a foot wrong all week.
Yeah, now Chris Froome, when I spoke to him before the Tour de France, was particularly impressed with the way that Tejay rode and pushed him very close at the Criterium de Dauphiné.
Did you laugh like a little girl when he said that?
All right, just leave that. I told you to leave that bit. Anyway, that finished just a couple of weeks before the Tour de France. Now, at last year's Tour de France, Tejay actually had a jour sans, which is basically one bad day, and that meant that he didn't finish on the podium. But he has had that progression. If he is consistent this year, it's not inconceivable to see him as the first American on the podium since, since...
Let's leave it there, mate. Let's not get into that.
Since a long time.
Yeah. Number 3. That was such a Matt Stevens moment, wasn't it? Number 3, cobbles don't make as much difference as the weather does.
Yeah, you know that's going into the programme, don't you?
I know full well.
Yeah, now we were all really looking forward to the cobbled stage, because of course last year there were some huge time gaps which emerged amongst the GC favourites. However, this year, despite a big whittling down process and Thibaut Pinot throwing pretty much every toy he had out of the pram, we actually saw the Fab Four all finish...
Fab Five. Fab Five.
Yeah, sorry. All right, we saw the Fab Five all finish in the front group just behind Tony Martin.
Yeah, so what we learnt from that day was that cobbles don't make as much difference as the weather, because on stage 2 we saw much bigger time gaps in the wind and the rain on the Dutch coast.
Wind and rain, that's where it's at, really.
Absolutely.
When you're
now
watching.
We've retired.
Yeah, when
Brilliant.
you're watching.
Number 4, Alexis Viemos emerges. Now, France has had a relatively disappointing first week of the Tour de France, with their GC hopes, Pinot losing huge chunks of time and also Romain Bardet losing a little bit as well. So Alexis Viemos winning stage 8 at the top of the Mur de Bretagne has, rightly so, given the French fans plenty to shout about.
Yeah, it certainly has. Now, Viemos has actually been on our radar for quite some time, but he really shot to prominence last year at the Giro d'Italia. There he was working for his teammate Domenico Pozzovivo, but still managed to finish quite high up the general classification himself. Now, he was also quite high up on the results on stage 3, which finished at the Mur de Huy. And Flèche Wallonne this year, which finished up exactly the same climb, he actually managed to finish 7th despite being involved in a big pile-up which came quite close to the finish. So I don't think that's the last that we're going to see of that man.
Absolutely, no, clearly a hard man. Didn't you start out as a mountain biker? I'm pretty sure you did.
I think, yeah, he did. You did as well. Did you start as a mountain biker?
I did actually, yeah. Didn't you start as a mountain biker?
Yeah, I did actually, so.
Yeah.
Actually, so something we've learned right here, right now, is that just because you started off life as a mountain biker, doesn't mean you're going to be a good rider.
No. Number 5, the Battle of the Sprints.
Yeah, the battle of the sprinters in the sprints has been extremely tight so far this year. Andre Greipel has emerged as top dog with 2 wins to Cav's 1. Hardly dominant, but still impressive.
Yeah, I think what's been most interesting though is just how tight they've been. There's not been more than a bike length margin of victory in any one of those sprints. Now, is that a coincidence? Possibly, but I think also the fact that these stages have been really, really tough, what with the wind and the rain and also the fighting in the peloton. So I'm wondering whether or not the riders are just more fatigued when they're contesting these sprint finishes. It would certainly go some way to explaining how Fabian Cancellara managed to finish 3rd in a sprint on stage 2.
Yeah, you might well be onto something there, Si.
Hopefully.
Now, whilst we're talking about the sprinters, we must mention Peter Sagan. He hasn't taken a win this year, just as he didn't in last year's Tour de France, but incredibly, he's finished in the top 4 on 6 out of the 7 road stage. So it's not a surprise to see him going into this rest day in the green jersey. That consistency is absolutely incredible. And I think he also started off life as a mountain biker.
I believe he did, just like us then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, let's have a bonus 6th most interesting fact. We were actually reminded, by virtue of the fact that Peter Sagan is also in the white jersey, that he is still, in fact, a young rider, which is quite remarkable considering.
I'm so jealous of everything.
The fact that he's young, you're jealous of.
Yeah, and good.
His beard isn't a patch on yours.
No. Anyway, thank you very much. Hopefully you've learnt something from our rest day wrap up. Very interesting, I think you will agree. And if you did think it was interesting, make sure you give us a thumbs up, which is just down below this video. But we've got plenty more content to show you. So if you click just up there, there is our Tour de France playlist, which is going to have loads of content for you throughout the Tour de France. And if you click just down there, we've got our iconic climb from this very mountain, which is the Col du Tourmalet, which peaks at 2,115 metres above sea level. I rode it, so I didn't bother.
You've also done that entire outro on your own. I don't think I need to bother either.
Well, you've got to tell them to subscribe, sorry.
No, you did it, mate. You've done it all.
And to subscribe to us, click on Si's miserable face.
It's not miserable. It's happy.
Yeah.
Number 3. That was such a Matt Stevens moment, wasn't it?
Merci.
Okay.